exactly the same thing. So here's some symbolic equivalents. And the reason, you might think of a symbol as something that represents something else, but that's not exactly the right way to think about it. The symbols, in this sense, are elements of this domain. So the domain encompasses a tremendous number of phenomena. And these are some of the phenomena. So there's nature. Nature's the unconscious. Why? Well, it's beyond you. Your unconscious mind, that's not you. That's nature inside you. It does what it wants. It'll do all sorts of things you don't want it to do. And there isn't much you can do about it. And all you have to do is notice all the stupid things you've done in the last 6 months to understand to what degree you're in the grip of the unconscious. You know, maybe you fall in love with someone and you don't even like them. I mean, what the hell's up with that? And there's nothing you can do about it. You'll act like a moron, just like every human being who's ever lived acted like a moron when that happened to them. So you're gripped by it. The darkness, that's nature too. That's what lurks outside the campfire. It's like the terrible things that prey on the unwary. And of course that's true. That's why it's not just symbolic. These things aren't just symbolic. There are monsters. You know, parents will tell their children when they have a dream, well, there's no such thing as a monster. It's like, and then, you know, then they'll tell them not to ever approach a stranger on the street because God only knows what'll happen. It's like, those two things do not go together. They're either monsters or there aren't. And people are so damn afraid of them still that, you know, they torture their children to death with threats, with the idea of threats that don't even exist. Like the probability that a given child is going to be abducted by a stranger is so close to zero that, you know, you might as well not even bother thinking about it. It's almost always a divorced parent that comes along and grabs them and runs off with them. So, you know, well, it's a custody dispute issue most of the time. Hardly anybody gets abducted by strangers. Why would they want your child? Nature has got this other element too, which you sort of hear about it at a funeral, where it's ashes to ashes and dust to dust, right? Nature is the thing you emerge out of, like, poof, there you are. You're born, and you weren't around before, and then, you know, 50, 60, 70 years, give or take a decade, you're gone again. What did you come out of, and where do you go? Well, that's nature from a symbolic perspective too. It's out of nothing you come and back to nothing you go. And it makes absolutely no sense, but it doesn't matter because that's what happens. So that's sort of nature as the unconscious and the devouring. And then there's the Great Mother, the Queen, the Matrix, the Matriarch, the Container, the Cornucopia. You know what a cornucopia is? It's one of those things that you see at Thanksgiving. Weird thing, it's got this point at one end and it opens up into a kind of a big circle. It looks like a horn. It's made out of wicker, and things pour out of it. It's like, what is that thing? Well, it's a cornucopia, and it's a representation of the portal, in a sense, that everything flows out of. So you can think about it in some ways. You ever watch those time-lapse photographs of a flower opening? Of course you have. You know how it sort of comes out of nowhere and manifests itself? That's what the cornucopia is, a representation of the place from which all new forms constantly emerge. And that's what you're supposed to be thankful for at Thanksgiving, and you should be thankful for it. It'd be a pretty dismal world if that stopped happening. And then there's this, the object to be fertilized, the source of all things, the fecund and the pregnant. That kind of helps explain why it's the representation of the feminine that was used to represent the unknown, because the unknown is the place that all new forms emerge from, and that makes it fundamentally feminine. So that's one domain of unconscious symbolism. Things get assimilated to this too. So, for example, the strange is part of the unknown. Strange idea can be part of the unknown. The emotional, and that's because emotion overtakes you. You know, you're at a movie and all of a sudden, poof, you dissolve in tears. It's like it wells up from where? From the unknown interior and possesses you. And at the same time it does with everyone else in the movie, or, you know, everyone else who's tuned in and who has some feelings. So, other representations of the same domain. The foreigner, that's the person who comes from foreign lands because they're contaminated with things you don't understand. And sometimes that can be terrible because the thing they're contaminated with, especially in human, you know, in the dark recesses of human history, would be illnesses. I mean, God only knows where the Great Plague comes from, but we know that it came on ships. And so people left Italy because that's where the plague seemed to first manifest itself. They left, they went somewhere, picked up some new rats, came home, and like, poof, a third of Europe was dead. It was even worse when the Europeans went to the New World, right? Because as soon as the New World natives shook hands with the Europeans, it was like, bang, 95% of them died in the next 50 years. So the idea that the foreigner is contaminated with the unknown, that's a non-trivial idea. And if it isn't, the pathogens they carry, then it's their damn ideas that come sneaking into your culture and just blow it into bits over, a fair number of decades. It's something to be terrified of, By the same token, there's incalculable wealth that's been generated culturally and materially as a consequence of the intermingling of human beings from all over the world. So it's another one of those situations where it gives with one hand and it takes with the other. Hell, death, and the grave. The moon, ruler of the night and the mysterious dark. Matter, matrix, mother, same root words. And the earth, Mother Earth. So those are all those images are related to the same underlying well of meaning, and that's a representation of that which is always beyond you, from which all new things come, and to which all things return. That's the unknown.